Good evening, my dear listener. I'm so glad you're here tonight. In this quiet corner of time we share, where stories become lullabies for grown hearts. Before you close your eyes, I want you to find a little comfort in tonight's tale. It's called, If Only She'd Knocked on the Door Twice, He Would Have Known. Sometimes, love doesn't leave. It lingers in the quiet places, in the letters never sent, and in the knocks that never came. Tonight's story is one of those moments, a tale of rain, memory, and what-ifs. Welcome to Soothing Tales by Rooks, where bedtime stories meet the sound of the heart remembering. Now close your eyes, let the rain fall, and listen. So take a slow breath in and let it go. Let your shoulders drop. Let your thoughts slow down. Wherever you are, in your bed, on your couch, or sitting beside the window, know that this moment is only for you. Now, close your eyes if you wish, and let's begin our story. Sometimes, love isn't lost in the storms we expect. It slips away quietly in the hush between one heartbeat and the next, or in the silence after a single knock that never came again. In a small coastal town, where the sea carried secrets more faithfully than words, stood a cottage of pale stone and weathered shutters. It faced the cliffs like a patient sentinel, waiting for stories to begin and end. And tonight, it waited again. Anna had only been here 3 days. Her suitcases were still half open, her paintbrushes still dry. She had come seeking quiet, the kind that didn't ask questions, the kind that let grief rest in corners unseen. She spent her evenings staring at the sea through the thin veil of rain, wondering if the ocean too.
A man who walked the shore alone, always at dusk,
Next door,
as if searching for something the tide had taken.
Dim light.
The first time Anna saw him, he was standing by his gate, coat collar turned up,
a writer who
eyes
hadn't
lost in a
published in
notebook he
years.
didn't seem to write in anymore. She wanted to say hello, but she didn't. He looked like someone who had made peace with solitude, or perhaps punishment. That evening, a letter slipped under her door. The postmark read his name. It was meant for him. The wrong cottage. Anna held it between her fingers, the paper still warm from someone else's story. A simple thing, a letter, but it carried the weight of connection, something she had almost forgotten how to feel. She waited until dusk to return it. The sky had turned to bruised violet. Rain drizzled in quiet threads down her sleeves. She walked to his door, the envelope pressed against her palm, her heartbeat loud enough to rival the waves. She raised her hand and knocked. Once. The sound echoed softly through the wood, a question, a hesitation, a chance waiting to be answered. Inside, Elias froze. He had been writing a letter of his own, or rather staring at one unfinished word he couldn't bring himself to complete. When he heard the knock, something stirred in him, a ghost of memory. For a moment he thought it was her, the one who'd left long ago, the one who used to knock twice. His breath caught. He waited, but there was only silence, and then footsteps fading. On the other side of the door, Anna stood still. She told herself he wasn't home. Maybe tomorrow it wouldn't matter. So she slid the letter through the gap, watched it disappear into the darkness of his floor, and turned away. Neither of them knew that between that single knock and the silence that followed, something delicate had begun to shift, something that could have changed everything, if only she'd knocked on the door twice. The morning after the rain, the sea was calm, a stillness that felt almost like an apology. Elias woke before dawn, the kind of waking where the mind remembers loss before the body remembers light. He found the letter by the door, slipped halfway beneath the rug, a small white edge in a world of gray. He picked it up, turned it over in his hands. His name, his old address. A faint smudge where a raindrop had kissed the paper. Someone had brought it back to him. He opened the shutters. Across the hedge, he saw movement through the window next door, a figure in a soft blue cardigan, painted by the light that fell like dust through thin curtains. He didn't know her name then, only that she had eyes that seemed to see the world slowly, like someone who had learned to treasure silence. He wanted to thank her, but gratitude, he found, was a fragile thing to speak aloud when your voice had grown unused to kindness. So instead, he wrote. He took a sheet of paper, the same kind he had once written novels upon, and began to write not a story, but a small note. To the kind neighbor who returned my letter. Thank you. The world doesn't often bend towards such small mercies anymore. He folded it neatly, slipped it beneath a small stone, and left it by her windowsill that evening, just as dusk wrapped the cottages in gold and gray. Anna found it an hour later, when the rain had stopped and the air smelled of salt and memory. She read it twice, then looked toward his darkened window, a faint light trembling behind the curtain. For reasons she couldn't explain, her throat tightened. She had left the city to forget, to let silence mend what heartbreak had torn apart. But silence, it seemed, was never empty. It carried echoes, and sometimes the sound of someone riding next door. The next day she left a reply, short, careful. You're welcome. It was no trouble. The sea delivers what it wishes, and so it began, not with voices, not with glances, but with letters exchanged like secrets the wind was allowed to overhear. Each evening a new note appeared, a shared observation about the weather, a question about the cliffs, a memory of books they both had once loved, little threads, delicate and deliberate, woven between two quiet hearts who thought they were done feeling. Sometimes Anna would pause by the window, watching his shadow move behind the curtain, the way he lingered near the desk, the way he looked out, as if waiting for something to return that never would. And Elias, he began to time his writing to the rhythm of her footsteps outside. He didn't call out. He didn't open the door. He just listened to the faint tap of her shoes on wet stone, to the heartbeat of possibility he thought he'd forgotten how to feel. In the hush between them, something unnamed was taking root. It was quiet, hesitant, but real, like the first fragile leaf after a long winter. And though they never spoke, the sea could feel the weight of two lives beginning to lean toward one another. But love, like the tide, is patient. It waits until the next knock comes. The sea grew restless that week. Gray clouds rolled across the horizon like tired thoughts. Each afternoon, the wind climbed higher, and the waves began to strike the cliffs with the rhythm of a slow-beating heart. Anna painted through it. Stormlight fascinated her, the way it made colors ache. She kept her easel near the window, brush moving as if the sound of rain were guiding her hand. On the table beside her, Elias's newest note waited unopened. She told herself she would read it when the storm passed. But storms have a way of deciding their own endings. That evening, thunder arrived early. The sky cracked open and rain poured like a confession long withheld. Elias had written only 2 lines. "The sea is wild tonight. If you can hear it, you'll know how I feel." He wanted to slip the note beneath her door, but the wind made the path nearly invisible, and lightning flashed white across the shore. So he waited, lantern lit, door half open, listening. He thought he heard footsteps, soft, uncertain, then silence. He waited longer, the lantern trembling in his hand. Anna had, in fact, stepped out into the storm. She carried a small candle in a glass jar, its flame shivering but alive. She wanted to leave him a note, too, something simple, something brave. You don't have to wait for calm to speak, but halfway across the path, the wind stole it from her fingers. Paper spiraled into the dark like a tiny lost bird. She watched it disappear toward the cliffs. She stood there, soaked, unsure whether to go forward or back. Through the blur of rain, she saw the glow of his lantern, a warm pulse behind the doorway. One more step and he would see her. One more breath and the distance between them would close. But fear is a quiet voice that sounds almost like reason. She turned away, telling herself that tomorrow would come and that tomorrow, perhaps, she would be braver. Inside, Elias waited until the flame burned low. When he finally closed the door, the room felt smaller, as if the air itself had realized what had almost happened. Later, he found the candle jar by the hedge. Its flame was gone, but wax was still warm. He placed it on his desk beside the letters. For the first time in years, he began to write something longer than a note. Not a novel. Not yet. But a story about a woman who paints storms, and a man who mistakes thunder for silence. And outside, the wind carried away their unfinished words. But the sea remembered. The sea always remembers. By morning, the storm had tired itself out. The sea was calm again, a sheet of pale silver stretching toward the horizon, as if the world were holding its breath. Elias hadn't slept. He had spent the night by the window, watching the candle jar's wax harden to silence. Each hour that passed felt like a question left unanswered. He opened the shutters. Outside, the world gleamed, wet cobblestones, leaves glistening, and the faint trace of footprints in the mud leading from her cottage to his, and back again. For the first time, he smiled. Across the hedge, Anna stood by her own window, hair still damp from the night before. She looked out and saw him, a silhouette framed by pale morning light. Their eyes met, not long, not searching, just a quiet recognition, the kind that says, "I was there too." He raised his hand slightly, a small, uncertain wave. She returned it, then disappeared for a moment. When she came back, she was holding a cup of coffee in one hand and a folded note in the other. She stepped outside. The air was cool and smelled of salt. Each step toward his gate felt heavier and lighter all at once. When she reached his porch, she didn't knock this time. She left the note beside the candle jar and the steaming cup beside it. Black coffee, no sugar, the way he'd once mentioned in a letter. Then she turned, pausing for just a heartbeat. Her reflection flickered in his window, and then she was gone. Elias opened the door moments later. The note was damp at the edges, ink slightly blurred, but the words were still clear. "I think we both survived something last night." He read it 3 times, then looked at the cup, steam rising, fragile as forgiveness. He carried it to his desk, sat down, and began to write again. But this time, his words weren't heavy. They moved the way rain slides down glass, slow, sure, unafraid to fall. Later that afternoon, he wrote her a letter not meant to be left by the window. He walked across the garden, heart steady but uncertain, and placed it at her door. Then he knocked, once, and waited. Inside, Anna froze, just as he once had. She felt her breath catch, the same pull between fear and longing. But this time, she didn't let silence win. She walked to the door, hand trembling against the wood. For a moment, she thought of the first knock, the one that started everything. Then she knocked back, twice. And that sound, 2 gentle knocks against the door, was the world quietly beginning again. The sound of those two knocks lingered in the air longer than they should have, as if the cottage itself had been waiting years to hear them. Elias stood motionless. The echo of her touch still trembled through the wood. For a heartbeat, he thought he might be dreaming, that the night's silence had simply taken a different shape. But then came her voice, soft, careful. "You left something at my door." He opened it, and there she was, damp hair, rain on her shoulders, the faintest trace of hesitation behind her eyes. For a long moment, neither spoke. Only the sea filled the silence, the low, steady breathing of the earth reminding them both that time was still moving. Finally, he said, "I wasn't sure if you'd answer." She smiled, barely. "I almost didn't." And then they both laughed, quiet, unsure, but real. Elias gestured to the candle jar still sitting on his table. "You left this here. It's been keeping me company." She looked at it, then at him. Then it did its job. He hesitated, then motioned to the chair by the fire. "Would you stay? Just for a while?" Anna hesitated too, because saying yes to warmth felt almost like betrayal to all the nights she'd spent in the cold. But she nodded. She stepped inside, and the sound of the rain softened behind them, like the world was closing a curtain. They sat across from each other, two people who had known too much silence, now learning how to fill it again. For a long time, they didn't speak. Elias poured coffee. Anna watched the steam drift upward, curling like a memory. Finally, she said, "I used to believe people were like doors. Some are open, some stay locked forever." He smiled, eyes thoughtful. "And which am I?" She looked at him, the writer who had forgotten his own stories, the man who waited behind a door for a knock that never came, and whispered, "You're the one who just needed to hear the right knock." Outside, the rain began again, not angry this time, but gentle, cleansing. He reached for the notebook on the table, pages filled with words he had never sent. "I used to write endings," he said. "Now, I think I'd rather learn how to write beginnings." Anna smiled, eyes shining with a kind of quiet that wasn't empty anymore. "Then start with this one," she said softly, "because I think it's ours." The fire cracked, filling the silence between them with warmth, and for the first time in a long while, they both felt something that didn't ache. Just peace, simple, steady, like two waves meeting and realizing they've been moving toward each other all along. And outside the window, the sea listened, quietly folding the night around their voices, keeping the story safe for the morning. Evening came again, just as it always did, quietly, with the sound of rain brushing the windows and the sea whispering its ancient lullaby against the cliffs. In the cottage by the shore, two lamps glowed, one in her window, one in his. And for the first time, the space between them no longer felt like distance. Days passed in their small, unhurried rhythm, mornings of shared coffee, afternoons of letters still written, but now delivered in person. Sometimes they spoke for hours, sometimes only a few words, and sometimes just silence, comfortable, companionable, the kind that heals rather than haunts. Elias wrote again, not for publication, not for the world, but for her. Stories of forgotten doors, of letters carried by the wind, and of a woman who reminded him that love is not something we find, it's something that finds us again. One morning, Anna left early to paint by the cliffs. She stood at the edge, the ocean stretching endless before her, and the wind tugging gently at her hair. She thought of all that had almost not happened, of the night she'd knocked once and walked away, of how a second knock, that simple, tiny act, had changed everything. She smiled, and in that quiet, the sea seemed to smile back. When she returned, Elias was waiting by the door. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. He just held out his notebook, its first page open, a line written at the top. If only she'd knocked on the door twice, he would have known. She read it slowly, then looked up at him, eyes soft, a little wet. "Know what?" she asked. He hesitated, then answered, "That love was still waiting. Right here." They stood there in the doorway, the same place where silence had once kept them apart, now filled with something wordless and whole. The waves rolled below, the air smelled of rain and beginnings, and as the evening folded itself around them, it was hard to believe how easily one small sound, two gentle knocks, could turn the story of a life into something that finally felt like home. Sometimes love doesn't arrive with grand gestures. Sometimes it comes softly, hidden in hesitation, carried in letters, or found on a rainy night when someone finally decides to knock one more time. And so, if you ever find yourself standing before a closed door, heart uncertain, hand trembling, remember this story, because sometimes all it takes is one more knock. If you'd like more soothing bedtime stories like this, please remember to subscribe, leave a quiet night emoji in the comments, and join me again tomorrow night for another story whispered just for you. Sleep well, my friend. Good night.